Well, good afternoon and welcome to my second YouTube video. The first one I put together touched on two topics, debugging of an adapter and how to pass in a JSON string or JSON encoded object into the adapter. After playing around with it a little more, I got the passing in an actual JavaScript object into an adapter working. So I wanted to touch on that and also touch a little bit on the performance of the two to see which one makes more sense to use. So I'm going to do a little bit of a review here. If you've seen the first video, I had a function called run adapter code, and this is in Worklight 6.1. I have my hybrid application called adapter. I have an adapter called calculator adapter, and in there I'm doing a simple adding of x plus y and returning back z. So in the adapter code, I construct my JSON object or JSON encoded object, or however you want to phrase it, where I have members x, y, and z. And then I put together my invocation information. I'm calling the procedure add, and as a parameter, I'm taking that JSON or that JavaScript object and converting it into a JSON encoded string. Passing that across and through the regular invocation of the adapter framework. And then on success, and I've actually incorporated a stopwatch class in there so I can see how long it takes. I decode or parse out the JSON object into a JavaScript object, print out what the result is, and print out what the actual value z that I'm looking for, and then I stop the timer. So that was what happened on the first go around, my first video. The second one that I'm doing here, I created a second function called run adapter code 2, so I could cut and paste code. I'm creating the same JavaScript object, same exact values, setting up the invocation data the same, except I'm calling now a second parameter or procedure on my adapter of add2, and I'm passing the object itself across instead of serializing it out to a string. In my options down here below, I'm calling a different success method of success2 because it's, of course, passing back different data. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit here in my code. And here's my success2 function, where it does the same exact type of work that happened in the first one, whereas I write out the result, and I also access what the value of z is, and I write that out, and then I stop. So the things that you're not seeing in here that is in the one above is the actual parsing of the JSON encoded string into an actual JavaScript object. So the question is, what happens on the Java side and which one of these performs better? So I'm going to take a quick look here to show you the adapter implementation. And the adapter implementation is really, basically the same exact thing. As you can see, add1 was the original, add2 is a new one. The only difference is I'm calling a different function, add2. If I go over to the Java code, in the original add method, I had where I parsed in the data, wrote it out, or excuse me, parsed in the data, used the value method, the little helper method I created to get the actual values of x, y, did the math, put the value back into the JSON object, serialized it, and then returned it. In the add2, I'm using the same value function that I had before that pulls out and converts from an object to a long, and then from a long object to an actual long value. And I'm pulling out x, y, calculating it, and then I'm putting it back into in this instance, it's a scriptable object. So in the previous one, I was taking in a string data. Now I'm taking in a scriptable object. And one thing I just noticed, let me get rid of this line here. So it's doing similar to similar functionality. And while I'm doing this, you can see that down here, Worklight is redeploying my code, and it's done deploying it. So, and then I create a new long, and I put it back up into the scriptable object that I get across. So when you pass an actual JavaScript object Worklight converts it to a scriptable object. And then from the scriptable object, which is a Mozilla-based object, you can go through and you can do get property, you can do put property, and a couple of other things. These are all static methods on the scriptable object class. Now the real question comes down to which one of these performs faster. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to go over to Chrome, and I'm going to start it up here. You can see I've got my original Go button, and I've got now a Go button where it sends across as a Java object. I'm going to open up the console, and the console is going to spit out how long it actually took. So if I run the serialization, that took 59 milliseconds. And I'm going to run it a couple times because I've noticed changes over time, and you can see it kind of fluctuates between 11 and 22, 23 milliseconds. Now I'm going to run it through passing a JavaScript object. So it's using that scriptable object to pass it into the adapter. And so my first run of that is 18 milliseconds. Now I'm going to click on it a couple times just like before. And again, the times vary. And from looking at it, they fluctuate between the same. If you click back and forth, you can see I've got one down to 9 milliseconds, somewhere 19 milliseconds. So the short answer is, does not look like there's really a difference from a performance standpoint. There is a difference, and I'll go back to the Java code here. There is a difference in the Java code in that you're not doing the serialization and deserialization. You're just dealing with a strict object, so it makes your Java code smaller. You are also, if I look over in the JavaScript code in main.js, I still have to handle the serialization and deserialization there, because if you look at the results, I have to pull out the results that are serialized, and I have to serialize the results here when I pass them across. So passing by a string across, you have to do more work on your side. It probably makes it easier on the Worklight framework in that it doesn't have to convert anything, it just sends across the string. Whereas if I use the second method where I'm passing in an actual JavaScript object and I'm dealing with JavaScript objects, it's less code on my side, but now the Worklight has to do effectively the same thing. It probably does under the covers the serialization and deserialization out into the scriptable object format. So my personal answer would be, if you're looking for reducing the amount of code that you're having to put in your application and making it simpler on yourself as a programmer, definitely go with passing in the JavaScript object. There's a lot less for you to do, and let the framework handle it. If you're more of a control freak and you have to say, I want it encoded this specific way so I can see it going across and you handling it, then do it by the string. But I would recommend using the JavaScript objects. It fits more into a programming style where you're letting the infrastructure handle the work for you instead of having to always remember, okay, now that I got the result, I have to parse it back. So again, thank you and have a good day. If you have any comments or anything else you'd like me to put out there, let me know. Bye-bye.